The clatter of the stagecoach wheels against the hard-packed dirt road did little to drown out the sound of Faith Williams's quiet sobbing, her tears falling onto the simple cotton dress that could no longer hide the gentle swell of her stomach, evidence of a love affair that had cost her everything. Nevada City, California, 1875. The gold rush had slowed, but the town still bustled with miners, merchants, and those seeking fortune in the Sierra Nevada foothills. Faith clutched her small carpet bag containing all she had left in the world, a change of clothes, her mother's silver hairbrush, and $7.16. It was a pitiful sum to start a new life, especially for a woman in her condition. "Last stop, Nevada City," called the driver as the coach slowed. Faith wiped her tears with a handkerchief, squared her shoulders, and prepared to face whatever awaited her. At 20 years old, she had never imagined being alone and with child, cast out by her family in Sacramento with nowhere to go except this mining town where her late father's friend owned a boarding house. The stagecoach jerked to a halt, and Faith was the last to climb down, conscious of the curious stares from passers-by. Women alone were rare enough in these parts, but one clearly in the family way with no husband in sight was the subject of immediate gossip. Miss Williams. A stern-faced older woman approached her. "I'm Mrs. Abernathy. Harold wrote to me about your situation." Faith nodded, clutching her bag tighter. "Yes, madam, thank you for—" "I cannot help you," Mrs. Abernathy interrupted, her voice low but firm. "My boarding house caters to respectable women. I have a reputation to maintain." Faith felt the blood drain from her face. "But my father's friend said Harold misjudged what I would be willing to do. I am sorry for your circumstances, but I cannot have you here." The woman glanced around nervously. "The scandal would ruin my business." Faith stood frozen as Mrs. Abernathy turned and walked away, leaving her alone on the dusty street. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as she tried to comprehend this new blow. Her last hope had vanished. "You look like you could use some help." Faith turned to find a tall man watching her from beside the general store. He was leaning against a post, his cowboy hat tipped slightly forward to shade his eyes. Unlike the other men who had been staring at her with judgment or worse, his gaze held only concern. "I'm fine, thank you," she replied automatically, though it was clearly a lie. He pushed away from the post and approached, keeping a respectful distance. "Name's Lucas Keller. I run a small ranch outside town." His voice was deep but gentle, with a hint of a southern drawl. He looked to be in his late 20s, with sun-weathered skin that spoke of long days outdoors. Faith remained silent, unsure of his intentions. Men were the reason she was in this predicament in the first place. Specifically, the charming son of her father's business partner who had promised her marriage before disappearing to San Francisco when she told him about the baby. "I couldn't help overhearing," Lucas continued. "Seems you need a place to stay." "I'll find something," Faith said, attempting to sound more confident than she felt. Lucas nodded toward her midsection. "Places that'll take in a woman in your condition are scarce around here." Faith flushed with shame and anger. "I'm aware of that, Mr. Keller. No judgment from me, Miss Williams." "Faith Williams, Miss Williams." He removed his hat, revealing thick brown hair in need of a trim. "I have a proposition for you, though I reckon it might sound improper coming from a stranger." Faith stiffened. "I'm not that desperate, sir." A flash of understanding crossed his face, followed by a faint smile. "Nothing like that. I'm offering you a job and a place to stay. My housekeeper left last month to care for her ailing sister. Place has been a disaster since." Faith studied him, trying to detect any signs of deception. Lucas Keller was tall and broad-shouldered, with clear blue eyes that met hers directly. His clothes were worn but clean, and despite his rugged appearance, there was something about him that made Faith want to trust him. "Why would you help me?" she asked finally. "Everyone deserves a second chance," he said simply, "and frankly, I need the help. Can you cook?" "Yes. Clean, of course." "Then I'm offering you room and board plus $5 a week. My ranch is modest, but there's a separate room for you, with a lock on the door if that makes you feel safer." He paused. "And Miss Williams, no one out my way will ask questions about your condition." Faith glanced around the busy street where people continued to stare and whisper. With no money for a hotel and no friends in town, her options were severely limited. Pride warred with practicality. "How far is your ranch?" she asked finally. "About 3 miles outside town. We can get your things loaded in my wagon." He gestured to a simple farm wagon hitched to 2 sturdy horses. "These are all my things," Faith said, lifting her small bag. Something flickered in Lucas's eyes, pity, perhaps, or anger on her behalf. "Then I reckon we can head out whenever you're ready." Faith took a deep breath. "Mr. Keller, I should be clear. I am expecting a child in about 4 months. I won't be able to work as hard then." "I understand," he said. "The offer stands." Faith made her decision. "I accept your offer, Mr. Keller. For now." The ride to Lucas's ranch was mostly silent. Faith was exhausted from the journey and the emotional toll of the day, while Lucas seemed content to let her be with her thoughts. The wagon bumped along the uneven road, moving away from Nevada City and into the surrounding countryside. As they crested a hill, Lucas pointed ahead. "There it is. Keller Ranch." Faith looked where he indicated and saw a modest homestead nestled in a small valley. There was a main house built of logs and rough-cut lumber, a barn, a corral with several horses, and what looked like a chicken coop. Fields stretched behind the buildings, with cattle grazing in the distance. It wasn't grand by any means, but it looked well-maintained and peaceful. "It's not much," Lucas said, "but it's paid for. 20 acres of good grazing land, plus I've got some crops mostly for us and the animals, but I sell the excess in town." "It looks lovely," Faith said truthfully, feeling a small spark of hope for the first time in weeks. They pulled up to the house, and Lucas hopped down, coming around to help Faith from the wagon. She accepted his hand, noticing the calluses that spoke of hard work. Up close, the house was larger than it had appeared from a distance, with a wide porch running along the front. "I built it thinking I'd have a family someday," Lucas explained as he carried her bag up the steps. "Never quite worked out that way." Inside, the house was simply furnished but surprisingly spacious. A large main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. Several doors led off the main room. "Kitchen's well stocked," Lucas said, gesturing to the cast iron stove and the cupboards. "I'm not much of a cook, but I manage." "Through there is my room," he pointed to a door, "and this will be yours." He opened another door, revealing a small but clean bedroom with a single bed, a chest of drawers, and a small table with a mirror. "There's a washroom out back," he continued, "and the outhouse is just beyond that. I've got running water pumped in from the well, one of the improvements I made last year." Faith stepped into the bedroom, taking in what would be her home for the foreseeable future. The bed was neatly made with a colorful quilt, and fresh curtains hung at the small window. "Mrs. Peterson, the former housekeeper, left things tidy," Lucas explained, noticing her surprise at the feminine touches. "I haven't changed anything." "It's perfect," Faith said softly. "Thank you, Mr. Keller." "Lucas," he corrected. "If we're going to be living under the same roof, might as well use our Christian names." Faith nodded. "Lucas then, and I'm Faith." "Faith," he repeated as if testing the name. "Well, Faith, I'll let you get settled. I've got some chores to finish in the barn. Supper's usually around 6, but take your time today. You must be tired from your journey." After Lucas left, Faith sat on the edge of the bed, overcome with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. She placed a protective hand over her stomach. "We'll be all right," she whispered to her unborn child. "For now, at least, we have shelter." She unpacked her meager belongings, hanging her 2 dresses in the small wardrobe and placing her mother's hairbrush on the dresser. The sight of it brought tears to her eyes as she remembered her mother's face when Faith had confessed her condition. The disappointment and shame had been unbearable, but it was her father's cold fury that had resulted in her banishment. "You are no daughter of mine," he had declared. "No respectable man will have you now. You've made your bed, Faith, now lie in it, but not under my roof." Faith wiped away her tears and squared her shoulders. Self-pity would do her no good. She had a job to do, and she would do it well. Perhaps, in time, she could save enough money to move on, to find a place where she and her child could start fresh without the weight of scandal following them. When Faith emerged from her room an hour later, Lucas was still out in the barn. Seeing an opportunity to prove her worth, she explored the kitchen and began preparing a simple supper from the provisions she found. By the time Lucas returned, she had a pot of beef stew simmering on the stove and a batch of biscuits in the oven. Lucas paused in the doorway, surprised by the delicious aromas filling the house. "You didn't have to start work today," he said. "I wanted to," Faith replied, stirring the stew. "It helps to keep busy." Lucas washed up at the basin near the door, rolling down his sleeves. "Smells better than anything I've made in months." They ate at the small table near the kitchen, the awkwardness of their situation creating long silences punctuated by occasional small talk. Faith learned that Lucas had come to California after the Civil War, having fought for the Union despite his Kentucky upbringing. He'd worked various jobs before saving enough to buy this land 5 years ago. "What about your family?" Faith asked, then immediately regretted it when she saw his expression darken. "Lost my parents before the war," he said simply. "No siblings. The army was the closest thing I had to family for a long while." "I'm sorry," Faith said softly. Lucas shrugged. "It was a long time ago." He changed the subject. "This stew is excellent. You're already earning your keep." After supper, Faith insisted on cleaning up despite Lucas's protests. When she finally retired to her room, she was bone-weary but felt a small sense of accomplishment. She had survived the day. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now she was safe. The next few weeks established a routine. Faith rose early to prepare breakfast, tended to the house, did the laundry, and prepared meals. Lucas worked from dawn till dusk, managing the cattle, tending the crops, and maintaining the property. They shared meals together, gradually becoming more comfortable in each other's presence. Faith found Lucas to be a considerate employer, never demanding too much and often insisting she rest when he thought she was overexerting herself. Sometimes, she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher: concern, perhaps, or curiosity. One evening, as summer turned to early autumn, they sat on the porch after supper, enjoying the cooler air. Faith's pregnancy was now unmistakable, her belly protruding noticeably beneath her dress. "When's the baby due?" Lucas asked, breaking a comfortable silence. "Late December, the doctor in Sacramento said." Lucas nodded thoughtfully. "Winter births can be hard out here. We should make arrangements with the midwife in town soon." The "we" didn't escape Faith's notice. "You don't have to concern yourself with that. I've imposed on you enough." Lucas frowned. "It's no imposition. You work hard, Faith, harder than you should in your condition." "I earn my keep," she said defensively. "You do more than that," he agreed. "But I didn't hire you expecting a woman with child to work like a field hand." Faith stared out at the twilight landscape, a lump forming in her throat. I keep thinking about what happens after, when the baby comes. No one will hire a single mother, especially one with no husband and no explanation. Lucas was quiet for a long moment. What happened to the father? He finally asked, his voice carefully neutral. Faith sighed. Thomas Harrington, son of my father's business partner. He promised me marriage, promised me everything. She shook her head. When I told him about the baby, he claimed it couldn't be his. 2 days later, he left for San Francisco. His father said he'd gone to attend university. Lucas's hands gripped the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles whitened. Coward, he muttered. My father didn't believe me when I said Thomas had promised marriage. He said I disgraced the family name. My mother cried for days but wouldn't go against him. Faith wiped away a tear. They gave me enough money for the stage-coach ticket and told me never to return. Lucas stood abruptly and walked to the edge of the porch, his back to Faith. When he finally turned, his expression was resolute. Faith, I have a proposal for you, not a romantic one, he added quickly, seeing her alarm. A practical arrangement. What kind of arrangement? She asked warily. Marry me. Faith stared at him, certain she'd misheard. Pardon, hear me out, Lucas said, coming back to sit across from her. Your child needs a name, a father. You need security. I can provide both. But why would you do that? Lucas ran a hand through his hair, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. I've got this ranch, this house I built for a family. I'm 30 years old with no prospects of a wife, not many women willing to live this far out, and I'm not much for socializing in town. He met her eyes directly. You need help. I need a housekeeper. The arrangement seems beneficial to both of us. Faith felt dizzy with shock. You would claim another man's child as your own. On paper, yes. The child would have my name, my protection. And what would you expect? Of me? Faith asked, her cheeks burning. Lucas understood her meaning immediately. Nothing you don't wish to give. We would share a house as we do now, but with the protection of marriage. No one would question your presence here or the child's birth. He paused. It wouldn't have to be a real marriage, Faith, just a legal one. Faith stood and walked to the porch, railing, overwhelmed. Lucas was offering her respectability, security for her child, things she had believed forever lost to her. But marriage was a sacred commitment, not something to enter into lightly, even if only for appearance's sake. I don't know what to say, she admitted. You don't have to answer now, Lucas said gently. Think about it. The offer stands whenever you're ready. Faith nodded, unable to form words around the confusing emotions swirling inside her. Good night, Lucas, she finally managed, retreating to her room. She barely slept that night, turning Lucas's proposal over in her mind. Could she marry a man she didn't love, even one as kind and decent as Lucas? Would it be fair to him, to her child? Yet what were her alternatives? To bear a child out of wedlock was to condemn both herself and her baby to a life of hardship and exclusion. By morning, Faith had reached a decision. She found Lucas at the breakfast table, already dressed for work. I accept your proposal, she said without preamble. Lucas looked up from his coffee, surprised by her directness. You're certain? Yes, Faith said, taking a seat across from him. But I want to be clear about the terms. This is a marriage of convenience, nothing more. I won't pretend otherwise, at least not between us. Lucas nodded. Agreed. And I'll continue to work as your housekeeper. I won't be a burden. Faith, Lucas said firmly, if we marry, you'll be my wife, not my employee. The work you do running this household is valuable, but I won't have my wife working for wages in her own home. Faith hadn't considered this aspect. Then how will I support myself and the baby? What's mine will be yours, Lucas said simply. That's how marriage works. Faith felt uncomfortable with this arrangement. She had never wanted to be dependent on anyone. "I need some independence, Lucas, some money of my own." Lucas considered this. "We'll establish a household account that you control for running the home and your personal needs. Will that suffice?" Faith nodded, relieved. "And what about—" She hesitated. "Sleeping arrangements. Nothing changes there," Lucas assured her. "You keep your room, I keep mine." "And if I choose to leave someday?" Faith asked, needing to know all the parameters. A shadow crossed Lucas's face. "I won't hold you if you wish to go, but the child will still bear my name, and I would ask for the right to maintain contact." Faith found this reasonable. "When would this marriage take place?" "As soon as possible, if you're agreeable. The sooner we marry, the less gossip there will be about the child's parentage." Faith took a deep breath. "Then let's do it. Next week, perhaps?" Lucas nodded, his expression serious. "I'll ride into town today to speak with the preacher and arrange the license." And so it was decided. 5 days later, Faith found herself standing before the preacher in Nevada City's small church, exchanging vows with a man she had known for barely a month. She wore her best dress, altered to accommodate her growing belly with wildflowers Lucas had picked that morning as her bouquet. The ceremony was brief, with only the preacher's wife and the local blacksmith serving as witnesses. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas gently kissed her cheek, the brief contact sending an unexpected flutter through Faith's chest. They signed the marriage certificate, Faith Williams becoming Faith Keller with the stroke of a pen, and rode back to the ranch in Lucas's wagon, now legally bound to one another. That evening, Faith prepared their first meal as a married couple. The atmosphere was strangely tense, both of them acutely aware of their new relationship, despite their agreement that nothing would change. "I got you something," Lucas said after dinner, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a simple gold band. "I know we didn't have rings for the ceremony, but I thought you should have one, to make things look proper." Faith stared at the ring. It was a tangible symbol of their arrangement, beautiful in its simplicity. "Thank you," she said, allowing him to slide it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "I have something for you too," she said hesitantly. "It's not much, but—" She went to her room and returned with a folded handkerchief. Inside was a hand-knitted watch fob. "I made it from some wool I found in the sewing basket for your pocket watch." Lucas took it carefully, running his thumb over the neat stitches. "No one's made me anything in a long time," he said quietly. "Thank you, Faith." That night, lying in her bed, Faith twisted the gold band on her finger. Mrs. Faith Keller. It was still too strange to comprehend. Yet she felt safer than she had in months, protected by the simple piece of paper that declared her a respectable married woman rather than a fallen one. The weeks passed, and autumn gave way to the chill of early winter. Faith's body grew heavier with the child, making her daily tasks more challenging. Lucas insisted she rest more, often taking on some of the household chores himself after his outdoor work was done. Faith discovered that her new husband, for all his rugged exterior, was a considerate man who noticed when she was tired or uncomfortable, before she mentioned it herself. On the first truly cold day of November, Faith was hanging laundry on the line near the house when she felt the baby kick particularly hard. She gasped, her hand flying to her belly. Lucas, who was repairing a fence nearby, looked up in alarm. "Faith, what's wrong?" "Nothing," she assured him, smiling despite herself. "The baby is just very active today." Lucas hesitated, then set down his tools and approached. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward her stomach. Faith was surprised by the request but nodded. Lucas placed his large hand gently on the swell of her belly, waiting. For a moment, nothing happened, then the baby kicked again, right against his palm. Lucas's eyes widened in wonder. "That's something," he whispered, a smile spreading across his face. "Strong little one you've got there." Faith found herself watching Lucas's expression, the genuine awe and tenderness there. It struck her that, in all the months of her pregnancy, this was the first positive reaction anyone had shown toward her child. Not disgust or disappointment or judgment, but wonder. "Do you think it's a boy or a girl?" Lucas asked, reluctantly withdrawing his hand. "I'm not sure," Faith admitted. "Sometimes I think a boy, sometimes a girl." "Either way," Lucas said with certainty, "the child will be welcome here." Faith felt tears prick her eyes at his simple acceptance. "Thank you, Lucas." As her pregnancy progressed, Faith began preparing for the baby's arrival. She sewed small garments from fabric Lucas purchased in town and transformed a wooden crate into a cradle, padding it with soft blankets. Lucas surprised her by returning from town one day with a beautiful rocking chair, which he placed near the fireplace. "Every mother needs a comfortable place to sit with her baby," he said, when Faith expressed her gratitude. December arrived with a dusting of snow that turned the landscape into a glittering wonderland. Faith, now in her final month, moved more slowly but insisted on maintaining most of her duties. Lucas had arranged for the midwife, Mrs. Thornton, to check on Faith regularly. "Everything looks to be progressing normally," the older woman assured them after her latest visit. "The baby has dropped, which means it won't be too much longer now. First babies often come late, though, so don't be concerned if you go past your time." Lucas nodded, taking in the information with the same seriousness he applied to everything. Since their marriage, he had thrown himself into learning about childbirth and infant care with characteristic determination. Faith often found him reading medical texts or pamphlets in the evenings, making notes on things they would need. One evening, a week before Christmas, Faith was teaching Lucas how to knit, his large hands surprisingly deft with the needles, when she felt a sharp pain across her lower back. She winced, setting aside her work. "Faith," Lucas noticed immediately, "just a twinge," she assured him. "The baby is probably just..." Another pain cut her off, this one stronger. Lucas was on his feet in an instant. "Is it time? Should I get Mrs. Thornton?" Faith started to shake her head, then gasped as a rush of fluid soaked her skirt and the chair beneath her. "My waters," she said, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Yes, it's time." Lucas was already pulling on his coat. "I'll get Mrs. Thornton right away." "Will you be all right until I return?" Faith nodded, trying to remain calm. "It could be hours yet. First babies often take their time." Lucas knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "Faith, I know we agreed this was just an arrangement between us, but I want you to know." He paused, struggling for words. "I'll be right back. You're not alone in this." Before Faith could respond, he was gone, the door closing firmly behind him. She managed to change into a clean nightgown and lay towels on her bed before the contractions began in earnest. By the time Lucas returned with Mrs. Thornton an hour later, Faith was pacing the bedroom, breathing through the increasingly painful contractions. "Lucas, wait outside," Mrs. Thornton ordered as she entered the bedroom. The midwife was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, with strong hands and a calming presence. "I want to help," Lucas protested. "Men are no use in the birthing room," Mrs. Thornton said firmly. "Keep water boiling and towels ready. That's how you can help." Faith met Lucas's worried gaze. "I'll be all right," she assured him, though another contraction was already building. The next 12 hours were the most grueling of Faith's life. The pain seemed endless, washing over her in waves that left her gasping and exhausted. Mrs. Thornton was a reassuring presence, guiding her through the labor with experienced confidence. Outside the room, Faith could hear Lucas pacing, occasionally calling through the door to ask if everything was all right. As dawn broke on December 18th, 1875, Mrs. Thornton announced that it was time to push. Faith, drenched in sweat and nearly delirious with exhaustion, summoned her remaining strength for the final stage of labor. "I see the head," Mrs. Thornton exclaimed after several pushes. "One more good push, Faith." With a final, monumental effort, Faith felt her child slip from her body, followed by an indescribable relief. A moment of silence, then the most beautiful sound she had ever heard, her baby's first cry, strong and indignant. "You have a son, Mrs. Thornton said, placing the squalling, red-faced infant on Faith's chest. "A fine, healthy boy." Faith stared down at her son in wonder, taking in his tiny features, his shock of dark hair, his perfect little hands with their miniature fingernails. Love unlike anything she had ever known flooded through her, fierce and overwhelming. "Lucas," she called weakly. "Lucas, come meet your son." The door opened immediately and Lucas entered, his face a mixture of concern and anticipation. When he saw Faith holding the baby, he stopped, momentarily overcome. "A boy?" he asked hoarsely. Faith nodded, smiling through her tears. "Come closer. He won't bite." Lucas approached the bed cautiously, perching on its edge. He stared at the tiny infant with undisguised awe. "He's perfect," he whispered. "So small but perfect. Would you like to hold him?" Faith offered, surprised by her own willingness to share this moment. Lucas looked uncertain. "I've never held a baby before. Support his head, Mrs. Thornton instructed, helping transfer the infant to Lucas's arms. The sight of her rugged cowboy husband cradling her newborn son with such tenderness made Faith's heart constrict with emotion. Lucas looked up at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Thank you," he said simply, though Faith wasn't sure what he was thanking her for. After Mrs. Thornton had cleaned up and given Faith instructions for her recovery, Lucas walked the midwife out to her wagon. When he returned, Faith was nursing the baby, a strange new experience that already felt natural. "Mrs. Thornton says you should rest as much as possible for the next few weeks," Lucas said, hovering uncertainly in the doorway. "Come in," Faith invited. "He's almost finished eating." Lucas entered and sat in the chair beside the bed. "He needs a name." Faith had been considering names throughout her pregnancy, but now that her son was here, none of them seemed quite right. "I thought perhaps William, after my grandfather," she suggested. Lucas nodded approvingly. "William Keller, it's a good, strong name." "William Lucas Keller," Faith amended softly. "If that's all right with you." Lucas looked up, startled. "You want to give him my name? You've given him your surname, your home, your protection," Faith said. "It seems fitting he should carry your name as well." Lucas cleared his throat, visibly moved. "I'd be honored," he said gruffly. The next few weeks were a blur of exhaustion and joy for Faith. William, or Will, as they began to call him, was a good baby. But like all newborns, he required constant attention. Lucas proved to be an unexpected source of support, taking the baby in the evenings so Faith could rest, changing diapers without complaint, and walking the floor with Will when he was fussy. Christmas came and went quietly, marked by a special dinner Lucas prepared and a handmade wooden rattle he had carved for Will. Faith gave Lucas a new wool scarf she had knitted in secret during the last months of her pregnancy. They exchanged their gifts by firelight, with Will sleeping peacefully in his cradle between them. As winter settled in earnest over the ranch, Faith found herself watching Lucas with new eyes. The man who had married her out of kindness was revealing himself to be far more than just her benefactor. He was patient, gentle with Will, and increasingly open with Faith. They spoke late into the evenings, sharing stories of their childhoods, their hopes, their disappointments. Faith learned that Lucas had lost his parents to typhoid when he was 16, that he had fought at Gettysburg and still had nightmares about it, that he played the harmonica but was too shy to let anyone hear him. In turn, she told him about her love of books, her dream of becoming a teacher before scandal had derailed her plans, and her complicated relationship with her strict father. By February, when Will was 2 months old, Faith had to acknowledge a truth she had been avoiding. She was developing feelings for her husband. It was unexpected and, she felt, inappropriate given the nature of their arrangement. Lucas had been clear that theirs was a marriage of convenience, nothing more. She had no reason to believe his feelings had changed, yet sometimes she caught him watching her when he thought she wouldn't notice, his expression soft and thoughtful. And the way he looked at Will not as a child he had agreed to claim, but as a son he treasured made her wonder if perhaps their arrangement was evolving into something neither of them had anticipated. One evening, as a late winter storm howled outside, Faith sat in the rocking chair nursing Will before bed. Lucas was reading by the fireplace, occasionally glancing up to smile at them. The domesticity of the scene struck Faith powerfully. This was what she had always wanted: a home, a family, a man who looked at her with warmth rather than desire alone. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked. Noticing her contemplative expression, Faith hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I was thinking how different my life is from what I expected. 6 months ago, I was in disgrace, cast out by my family. Now I'm here with Will with you, and I'm happy." She looked up at him. "I never expected to be happy again." Lucas set aside his book and moved to kneel beside the rocking chair. "I'm glad you're happy here, Faith. I never expected this either, but—" He reached out to stroke Will's head gently. "I can't imagine life without you both now." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning neither was quite ready to articulate. Faith's heart raced as Lucas's hand moved from Will to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "Lucas," she whispered, uncertain what she wanted to say. Before either could speak further, Will finished nursing and began to fuss. The moment broke as Faith adjusted her clothing and stood to put the baby to bed. Lucas returned to his chair, picking up his book, though Faith noticed he didn't turn any pages. That night, lying in her bed, Faith replayed the moment in her mind. Was she imagining the tenderness in Lucas's touch, the warmth in his eyes? Was it possible he felt something beyond the responsibility he had assumed when he married her? The question consumed her thoughts in the days that followed. She began to notice other small signs: the way Lucas found reasons to be near her, how his hand would brush against hers when passing items at the table, the fact that he now referred to Will as "our son" rather than "the baby" when speaking to others. March brought the first hints of spring to the ranch. The snow melted, revealing tender green shoots beneath. Lucas began preparations for spring planting, often taking Will with him on short walks around the property, pointing out animals and plants to the infant who watched with wide, curious eyes. Faith used the milder weather to begin a small vegetable garden beside the house. She was on her knees, planting carrot seeds, when the sound of an approaching wagon caught her attention. Looking up, she saw a smart buggy coming down the drive, driven by a well-dressed woman she didn't recognize. Lucas emerged from the barn, frowning at the unexpected visitor. He helped the woman down from the buggy. She was elegantly attired in a traveling suit that marked her as someone of means, certainly not one of their neighbors. Faith stood, brushing soil from her apron, and walked over to join them. "Faith," Lucas said, his voice oddly strained, "this is Mrs. Harrington, Thomas Harrington's mother. Faith froze, her blood turning to ice. Elizabeth Harrington was exactly as Faith remembered her: imperious, beautiful, and cold. The woman who had watched without protest as Faith was accused of trying to trap Thomas, who had supported her son's denial of paternity. "Mrs. Keller," Elizabeth said, her gaze traveling from Faith's face to the house behind her. "I see you've landed on your feet. What brings you here, Mrs. Harrington?" Faith asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "May we speak privately?" Elizabeth glanced at Lucas. "Anything you have to say to my wife can be said in front of me," Lucas stated firmly, moving to stand beside Faith. Elizabeth's lips thinned with displeasure. "Very well. I've come about the child. I understand you've had a son." Faith's arms instinctively wrapped around her middle as though she could still protect Will within her body. "Yes, our son William was born in December." "Your son," Elizabeth repeated, her tone making it clear she didn't believe the fiction. "Mr. Keller, I wonder if you're aware of the circumstances of your wife's condition when you married her." Lucas's jaw tightened. "I'm fully aware of everything, Mrs. Harrington. Faith has been honest with me from the beginning." Elizabeth looked momentarily taken aback. "I see. Well, that simplifies matters. Thomas has returned from San Francisco. He's married now, to a very suitable young woman from a good family." Faith felt a pang at this news, not of jealousy but of bitter resentment that Thomas had escaped all consequences while she had faced disgrace. "His wife is unable to have children," Elizabeth continued. "A tragic circumstance. When I mentioned to Thomas that your child had been born, he expressed interest in claiming the boy." "Claiming him," Faith repeated, disbelieving. "After denying his existence, after abandoning us both." "Circumstances have changed," Elizabeth said dismissively. "Thomas is prepared to be generous. He would provide financial support for the boy's education, ensure his future is secure." "In exchange for what?" Lucas demanded, his voice dangerously quiet. "In exchange for acknowledging Thomas as the child's father and allowing regular visits. Eventually, when the boy is older, he might even come to live with Thomas and his wife." Faith stared at Elizabeth in horror. "You want to take my son?" "Not immediately," Elizabeth said, as though offering a great concession. "But eventually, yes. It would be best for the child to be raised with the advantages the Harrington name can provide." Lucas took a step forward, his expression thunderous. "Mrs. Harrington, let me be perfectly clear. William is my son in every way that matters. He bears my name, he lives under my protection, and he will remain with his mother and me. Your son forfeited any right to that child when he abandoned Faith." "Mr. Keller, be reasonable," Elizabeth began, but Lucas cut her off. "I am being reasonable. A father isn't the man who plants the seed. It's the man who nurtures the child, who loves him, who would die protecting him." Lucas's voice vibrated with emotion. "I've been there since before Will was born. I held him minutes after he came into this world. I've changed him, fed him, walked the floor with him at night. Where was Thomas for all of that?" Elizabeth turned to Faith, clearly hoping to find a more receptive audience. "Your parents send their regards," she said, changing tactics. "They've mentioned they would like to see their grandson someday if you would permit it." Faith felt a surge of anger. "Now they acknowledge him, after casting me out, after forcing me to leave my home in disgrace." She shook her head. "You can tell my parents that if they wish to see William, they can come here and ask forgiveness for their treatment of their daughter. As for Thomas, he has no claim on my son. None." Elizabeth's face hardened. "This isn't over, Mrs. Keller." "Thomas has rights. Thomas has nothing," Lucas interrupted. "And if he or you come near my family again, I'll take legal action. Good day, Mrs. Harrington." Elizabeth glared at them both before turning and climbing back into her buggy. As she drove away, Faith felt her knees weaken. Lucas caught her arm, steadying her. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. "She wants to take Will," Faith whispered, tears filling her eyes. "She wants to take our son." Lucas pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "That will never happen, Faith, I swear it." Faith clung to him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "Thank you for defending us." "Always," Lucas murmured against her hair. "You and Will are my family now. Nothing and no one will change that." Faith looked up at him, suddenly aware of how close they were, how naturally they had come together. Lucas's gaze dropped to her lips, and for a moment she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he stepped back, releasing her. "I should check on Will," he said, his voice rough. Faith nodded, watching him go with a mixture of disappointment and confusion. Just when she thought they might be moving beyond their arrangement toward something real, Lucas pulled away. That evening, after Will was asleep, Faith found Lucas on the porch, staring out at the darkening landscape. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders against the early spring chill and joined him. "You think they'll try to take him?" she asked, voicing her deepest fear. Lucas shook his head. "The law is on our side. Will is legally my son. Even if Thomas were to claim paternity now, which would mean admitting he lied before, our marriage and my acknowledgement of Will as my own gives us the stronger position." He turned to look at her. "But I'll speak with a lawyer in town tomorrow, just to be certain." Faith nodded, relieved by his reassurance. "When you spoke to Mrs. Harrington today, the things you said about being a father—" She hesitated. "Did you mean them?" "Every word," Lucas said without hesitation. "Will might not be my blood, but he's my son in my heart." He paused, looking troubled. "Faith, there's something I need to tell you, something I should have said before we married." Faith tensed, waiting. "I told you I agreed to a marriage of convenience, and that was true. But—" Lucas ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she now recognized as a sign of nervousness. "I had feelings for you even then. Not love, not yet, I didn't know you well enough, but something. An attraction, a connection I couldn't explain." Faith's breath caught. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because you were vulnerable, alone, pregnant with another man's child. It would have been wrong to burden you with my feelings when you needed practical help, not romantic complications." He met her eyes. "I meant what I said about expecting nothing from this marriage that you didn't freely wish to give. That hasn't changed." "And now," Faith asked softly, "do you still feel that connection?" Lucas took a step toward her. "Now I know you, your strength, your kindness, your devotion to Will. I've watched you rebuild your life after everything was taken from you. I've seen you find joy again." He took her hand, his touch gentle. "Faith, I didn't just offer you my name and my home. I gave you my heart, though I never expected anything in return." Faith's eyes filled with tears. "Lucas, I've been so afraid to acknowledge my feelings for you. I thought this was just an arrangement to you, that I was merely a responsibility you'd taken on." "You're so much more than that," Lucas said, his voice husky. "You and Will, you're everything to me now." Faith moved closer, eliminating the space between them. "I think I've been falling in love with you since that first day, when you offered help to a stranger no one else would look at twice." Lucas cradled her face in his hands. "May I kiss my wife?" he asked, a smile touching his lips. Faith answered by rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his. The kiss was tender at first, then deepened as Lucas pulled her closer. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "I love you, Faith Keller," Lucas whispered against her lips. "And I love you, Lucas Keller," she replied, her heart full to bursting. "My husband in truth now, not just in name." That night, Faith moved her belongings into Lucas's room, their room now. Their marriage, begun as an act of kindness, transformed into one of love. As spring bloomed across the ranch, so too did their relationship, growing stronger and deeper with each passing day. Thomas Harrington made one attempt to pursue his claim on Will, sending a lawyer to the ranch in April. Lucas was prepared, having secured legal advice that confirmed their position. The Harringtons eventually withdrew, particularly after Faith's father, having heard about the confrontation, unexpectedly wrote to his daughter. The letter was formal and stilted, but contained a crucial admission that he had been wrong to cast her out, that his pride had cost him his daughter and grandson. He asked, not for forgiveness, but for the opportunity to make amends. Faith, after discussion with Lucas, wrote back cautiously, opening the door to a possible reconciliation while making it clear that her life was with Lucas now. By Will's first birthday in December 1876, the ranch was thriving. Lucas had expanded their cattle operation, and Faith had started a small side business selling preserves and baked goods in town. Will was walking, a sturdy little boy with his mother's eyes and his adoptive father's determined nature. They celebrated Christmas that year with a full house. Faith's parents visited for the first time, the initial awkwardness gradually giving way to genuine joy at being reunited. Faith's mother couldn't get enough of her grandson, while her father and Lucas found common ground discussing ranch management. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Lucas and Faith sat by the fire, enjoying a rare moment of quiet. "I have a gift for you," Faith said, handing Lucas a small package. Inside was a handcrafted leather bookmark with a message burned into it. "To my husband for giving me a home when I had none, a name when mine was taken, and love when I needed it most." Lucas read it, his expression soft with emotion. "I have something for you too," he said, producing a small velvet box. Inside was a proper wedding ring, more elaborate than the simple band he had given her after their courthouse wedding. "I thought it was time you had a ring that reflected what our marriage has become," he explained. Faith held out her hand, allowing him to slide the new ring onto her finger alongside the original band. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "I have one more piece of news," Lucas said, taking her hands in his. "I spoke with Judge Peterson while in town yesterday. The adoption papers are official. Will is legally my son now in every sense of the word. No one can ever challenge that." Faith threw her arms around him, overwhelmed with gratitude and love. "You've given us so much." "You've given me more," Lucas insisted. "A family, a purpose beyond just working this land." He placed a hand on her stomach. "And soon another child to love." Faith smiled, covering his hand with hers. She had shared the news of her pregnancy just a week earlier, to Lucas's uncontained delight. Their second child, their first together, would arrive in the summer. "You ever regret it?" Faith asked suddenly. "Taking in a desperate woman and her unborn child, marrying a stranger." Lucas shook his head, drawing her close. "Not for a single moment. When I saw you standing alone on that street in Nevada City, something told me my life was about to change." He kissed her gently. "I just didn't know it would change so wonderfully." Faith leaned her head against his shoulder, watching the firelight dance. From a nearby room came the soft sound of Will sighing in his sleep. Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing their ranch in pristine white. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the pain of betrayal, the sting of rejection, the fear of an uncertain future. All of it had led to this moment, this life, this love. Faith had lost everything once, only to gain something far more precious. A true home, a loving husband, and the family she had always dreamed of having. "I'm grateful for it all," she said softly. "Even the hardest parts. They brought me to you." Lucas tightened his arm around her. "And I'll be right here, Faith, for all the days to come." As the snow continued to fall and the fire burned low, Faith Keller closed her eyes, perfectly content. The girl who had once been cast out had found where she truly belonged in the arms of a cowboy who had offered her his name, his home, and eventually, his heart. By the summer of 1877, Faith's belly was round with their second child. Will, now an energetic toddler of 18 months, delighted in placing his small hands on his mother's stomach to feel the baby kick. Lucas had built an addition to the house, 2 more bedrooms for their growing family. Faith's parents visited more frequently, the relationship slowly mending. Her father had even helped Lucas construct a small schoolroom on the property, acknowledging Faith's long-held dream of teaching. "For when Will is ready for his lessons," he had said, "and for any other children in the area who need education." On a warm July evening, Faith went into labor. Unlike Will's birth, this one progressed rapidly. Lucas barely had time to fetch Mrs. Thornton before their daughter made her entrance into the world, announcing her arrival with lusty cries that brought tears to both parents' eyes. "She's beautiful," Lucas whispered, cradling the newborn with practiced ease. "What shall we name her?" Faith smiled tiredly. "I was thinking Margaret after your mother." Lucas looked up, visibly moved. "Margaret, Maggie for short, Maggie Keller," Faith agreed. "Perfect." By 1880, the Keller Ranch had become one of the most prosperous in the area. Lucas's careful management and Faith's additional income from teaching and her preserves business had allowed them to purchase adjoining land, expanding their operation. They now employed 2 ranch hands and had a proper garden that supplied most of their vegetable needs. Will, at 4, was a thoughtful, curious boy who adored his father and followed Lucas everywhere. 3-year-old Maggie was her mother's shadow, already showing Faith's talent for cooking. And their youngest, 2-year-old James, was the spitting image of Lucas with the same calm demeanor. The small schoolhouse Faith's father had helped build now served a dozen children from neighboring farms and ranches. 3 days a week, Faith taught reading, writing, arithmetic, and history to children ranging from 5 to 15 years of age. The other days, she managed the household and cared for their children, with help from a local girl who came in to assist with the heavier chores. Lucas had become a respected member of the community, serving on the town council and helping to organize the annual Nevada City Harvest Festival. The ranch that had once been a lonely outpost was now frequently filled with visitors, neighbors, students, friends they had made over the years. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Lucas surprised Faith with a trip to San Francisco, their first real vacation since their marriage. They left the children with Faith's parents for a week and stayed at an elegant hotel overlooking the bay. "I never imagined such luxury," Faith said as they dined in the hotel restaurant, feeling almost giddy at being alone together without the constant demands of the ranch and children. "You deserve it and more," Lucas replied, reaching across the table to take her hand. "These 5 years with you have been the happiest of my life, Faith." Faith squeezed his hand, remembering the desperate young woman she had been when they met. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day? Everyone deserves a second chance." Lucas nodded. "I meant it then. I didn't know I was giving myself a second chance too. We gave each other new lives," Faith said softly. "New beginnings." That night they walked along the waterfront, Faith's arm linked through Lucas's. The cool breeze from the bay ruffled her hair, and the moonlight silvered the water. In the distance, ships' lanterns bobbed like fireflies on the dark sea. "Sometimes I can hardly believe this is my life," Faith admitted, "that I could be so happy after thinking all was lost." Lucas stopped, turning to face her. "I've been thinking about Thomas Harrington recently." Faith stiffened slightly. "Why?" "Because I owe him a debt of gratitude," Lucas said, surprising her. "His cruelty brought you to Nevada City. His abandonment gave me the chance to be Will's father. If he had done the honorable thing, you would be Mrs. Harrington now, living in Sacramento, and I would never have known what I was missing. Faith considered this. I can't imagine being married to him now. He never really knew me, never wanted to. She looked up at Lucas. Not like you do. From the moment I saw you standing alone on that street, something told me you were important, Lucas said, drawing her close. I just didn't know then that you would become my whole world. Faith rose on her toes to kiss him, still marveling at how perfectly they fit together, how completely their lives had intertwined. "Take me back to the hotel, Mr. Keller," she whispered against his lips. "I believe we have an anniversary to celebrate properly." Lucas grinned, offering her his arm with an exaggerated bow. "Your wish is my command, Mrs. Keller." 10 years to the day after Lucas had first offered Faith a job and a place to stay, they stood together on the porch of their ranch house, watching their children play in the yard. Will, now 10, was teaching 7-year-old Maggie and 6-year-old James how to throw a lasso, using a fence post as their target. Their youngest, 4-year-old Elizabeth, named after Lucas's grandmother, sat nearby making a daisy chain, occasionally clapping when one of her siblings made a successful throw. "Did you ever imagine we'd have all this?" Faith asked, leaning against Lucas's side. "Not in my wildest dreams," he admitted, his arm warm around her shoulders. 4 beautiful children, the most successful ranch in the county, and the finest wife a man could ask for. Faith smiled, remembering the frightened, pregnant girl who had stepped off the stagecoach in Nevada City a decade earlier. "When my father cast me out, I thought my life was over. I never imagined it was just beginning." "Speaking of your father," Lucas said, "I received a letter from him yesterday. He and your mother want to visit for Christmas again." Faith nodded, pleased. The relationship with her parents had been fully mended over the years, especially after her father had fallen ill 3 years earlier, and realized life was too short for stubborn pride. Now they were doting grandparents who visited regularly and corresponded frequently. "They're always welcome," Faith said. "The children love having them here." As the sun began to set over the western hills, casting long shadows across their property, Lucas pulled Faith closer. 10 years, he marveled. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I saw you for the first time." "And sometimes it feels like I've loved you forever," Faith replied, turning in his arms to face him. At 30, she was more beautiful than ever, her face bearing the subtle lines of laughter and a life fully lived. Lucas, now 40, had silver threading through his dark hair at the temples, but his blue eyes were as clear and vibrant as the day they'd met. He bent to kiss her, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing over their years together. "I love you, Faith Keller," he murmured against her lips. "Thank you for making me the happiest man alive." "And I love you, Lucas Keller," she responded, her heart as full as it had been on their wedding day. "For giving me a home when I had none, a name when mine was taken, and love when I needed it most." From the yard came the delighted shrieks of their children, the sound of their legacy together. Faith and Lucas turned to watch them, hands entwined, facing the future they had built from what had once seemed like nothing but desperation and charity. It had become so much more a love story written not in grand gestures but in daily kindnesses, in shared struggles, in the quiet moments between two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed most: a second chance, a new beginning, a love to last a lifetime.